Disclaimer: the information in this video is not meant to replace any official information and is only meant as extra help for any person who may have lacked it. We encourage people to look for more information on the sources that we provide and externally with experts. Okay, so hello everybody who is listening and welcome to our 6th episode of our safety podcast. I am your host for this episode, S, and I am here with my co-host, L.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about bisexuality and pansexuality. I think I've already mentioned this is our 6th episode, but yeah. Okay, to start off, we're going to be talking about basically the definitions of the two sexualities. So, the word bisexual, it literally, in terms of like dictionary, it means to liking both or an attraction to both men and women. But it can also constitute an attraction to multiple genders. For example, for me, I like both men, women, and non binary people. And bisexuality can also be referred to as solely bi, that kind of thing. So, like, somebody would be like, oh, I'm a bi woman, or I'm bi. That also, that. Um, Pansexuality, in a literal sense, it refers to liking all or an attraction to people regardless of gender. Despite this meaning, pansexuality does not typically involve polyamory. Um, that is, a pansexual person does not necessarily seek out a relationship with everyone around them, but is instead attracted to anyone on aspects outside of their gender or gender expression, like their personality wise. They don't have to be polyamorous. They could be, but they're a pansexual. Just because someone's pansexual doesn't make them polyamorous. And pansexuality or being pansexual is usually being referred to as pan, so I'm pan. We would like to mention by curiosity, and it's actually what I identified as when I was questioning. So, bicurious is a term that is often used to describe someone who is exploring the sexuality outside of a traditional heterosexual attraction, but they are not yet confident about their interests in the other genders. And they often wish to explore their interests, and it doesn't require romantic or sexual involvement with others, and it can often be found through just self-exploration of their likes and dislikes of others, so like crushes. For me, I found out I was bi. Oh, yeah, I found out I was bi when I ended up having a crush on like a friend, that kind of thing. The difference between being bisexual and pansexual is that a bisexual person may have an inclination towards an individual based on their gender or gender expression. Um, like maybe they like people who present themselves as more masculine or feminine, whereas a pansexual person will not have any regard for gender. I'm going to talk a lot about my personal experiences for myself. I do tend to like or have an inclination towards people who present themselves as more masculine. Um, this doesn't necessarily mean that they may be a man. Uh, they could be a woman. They could be non-binary. It's usually like masculine in terms of like traits as well. Um, there's a there's a whole other things to talk about there in terms of like or debate to be had there, but I'm just trying to talk here, so yeah. Next we're going to be talking about misconceptions of being bisexual and pansexuals. So the first misconception that we have is bi/pan people are promiscuous by nature due to their interests in more than one gender. Promiscuous is that they tend to cheat/lack loyalty. I would like to mention that I have heard this many times being used as an excuse to not date somebody who's bi and pan. And I will also like to mention that this is not true. Um, just because somebody is bi/pan doesn't mean that they are more likely to cheat. It's if a person cheats, it's more describing their character than their sexuality. So our second misconception is bi/pan people will eventually pick a side. I've been told this many times. Um, no, being bi/pan is usually who you're attracted to. It doesn't mean uh it means that basically you like whoever you like. You're not gonna go ahead and just because you date somebody from who's a man or who's a woman or who's whoever, it doesn't mean that you're picking a side. It just means you like that person. Our third misconception is that bi slash pan people seek polyamorous relationships. This isn't something. Oh, while there can be people or bi slash pan people who do seek polyamorous relationships, not everybody does. It depends on the person. It depends on whether or not you're able to love two people or like more than one person at the same time, and it doesn't really have anything to do with who you're attracted to. Our fourth misconception is that bi slash pan people want to have sexual intercourse with multiple people. This isn't, um, like I said previously on the bi slash pan people seek polyamorous relationships. While a couple of us might, or some of us might want to have sexual intercourse with multiple people, it's not. It doesn't have to deal with our sexuality. It has to deal with like the person, I guess, is not necessarily in a bad way, just like it's not indicative of being um our sexuality isn't indicative of wanting to have sexual intercourse with multiple people. Our next misconception is it's easier to have slash find a relationship if you're bi slash pan. I have heard this before, and I would like to say that that's not true. Just because you have more people who could technically like you, or more people that you could technically like, doesn't mean that you will like them and that they will like you. Our next one is people identify as bi slash pan for attention only. That's not true. Um, and this is because people often face a lot of discrimination and judgment from their family from being bi or pan. And it could often be something that you want to hide in order to like make sure that you keep up with people's uh, expectations and views of you. So that might be a little personal, but it's whatever. The second to last stigma is you're not bisexual if you have an inclination towards a specific gender. Again, that's not true. Being bisexual does not mean that you have an even inclination or like you like men and women 50-50. Being bisexual means that you might like men 80% of the time and women 80 or 20% of the time, or you might like women 90% of the time and men 10% of the time. You can have an inclination towards a specific gender and still be bisexual. Our last misconception is you have to have had sexual intercourse or relationships with various genders slash sexes in order to truly qualify as bisexual. Again, not true. I would like to mention that a lot of people find out that they're bisexual before they have any experience with anybody. Um, and it's really just your history doesn't deal with your sexuality, if that makes any sense. But yes.
I think it's important to dispel a lot of these different myths because it's often one of the more criticized, I would say, parts of the community. There's a lot of erasure going on. That's why there's like a bi visibility day. It's like to ensure that people recognize that there is this this identity. It's often one that people try to oppose and one that people try to counter by saying that you will pick a side or that you will eventually or that you're just trying to have different multiple partners when in reality it's not the case.
Yeah. Um and it could even like the prejudice could even come outside of your family, it could even be in the community. So we're actually going to talk about that later on. But moving on to contraceptives, as this depends on the sex and relationship of the person, we do advise that you look at our other guides, lesbian and gay, for better information on the topic. Some of the contraceptives we do list here are dental dams, condoms, latex gloves, plastic wrap, douches, and lube. Okay, so we're now going to be talking about stigmas and misconceptions, I guess, in the communities now. or that we can face a lot. In some cultures and even within the LGBTQ plus community, some bisexuals tend to face discrimination over other queer peoples, and this is mostly caused by common misconceptions such as the idea that being bi/pan is a phase or does not exist as a person will pick a side. I have mentioned this before, and we did mention this just now. Um, but yeah, this again, not true. Who we choose to love, who we choose to be in a relationship with, it doesn't. It just means we're attracted to the person. Um, and being bisexual or pansexual means that we can be attracted to multiple people, but we have chosen a person. We haven't chosen a side or a specific gender. Okay, so the next stigma is the thought of being in a relationship with people of different genders often makes people assume that a bisexual person only seeks sexual gratification or isn't sure of their sexuality. They have yet to decide which gender they prefer. I guess this is tied to the first one, in a way with the they have yet to decide which gender they prefer. And I have heard many bisexual people having the common thought of I've also experienced this myself, um, thinking, oh, maybe I'm straight, oh, maybe I'm just lesbian. So yeah, I have heard this being, or I have heard of bisexual people being really like questioning their sexuality in a way, and I have also experienced it. uh it's not really the case. I mean, while sexuality, our labeling of sexuality can be quite fluid, um somebody can still be bisexual and still be questioning themselves. It never really ends. I have heard many people being like, "Oh, I used to be at the very beginning when I was questioning, I used to be straight, and then I went to bisexual. Then I decided I was lesbian, and then maybe they went back to bisexual." So it's really in terms of like our labeling of our sexuality that I think is a little bit more fluid. So, our third misconception is outside of the community, bisexual people might feel like they have to comply to heteronormative standards. Within the community, the opposite can be true, as bi/pan people may want to feel that they are justified to be within the community. I have also experienced this. It's more like having to comply to heteronormative standards outside of the community. For example, if your family's like, oh, which actor do you like? When in reality, you like the pretty actress right next to the actor. Um, I'm sure a lot of people have also felt that. I've actually haven't felt it much within the community, but that may be also because I tend to hang out with people who are bi and pan. So it really depends on the person of like their own experiences. Our last misconception is within the community, it is also often assumed that a bi/pan person will settle for a particular gender due to many queer people having undergone a particular time in their lives where they doubted their sexuality and transitioned from heteronormative expectations to embracing queer relationships. That was a little bit of a wordful, but basically what we're trying to say is that this it's assumed that bi/pan people will pick a side in the end. But like I've mentioned before, who we choose to marry, who we choose to be in a relationship with, it doesn't have anything to do with our sexuality. Like it might, like in terms of oh, who we're attracted to, but we're not choosing. Our sexuality doesn't change with the relationships that we're in. So if I end up marrying a man, I'm not automatically straight. If I end up marrying a woman, I'm not automatically lesbian. I'm still bisexual. And I hope that this was at least a bit helpful. I know it was mostly me talking about my personal experiences, but I hope that was helpful in a way. I remember researching this and looking at everything's and finding out that hearing about people's personal experiences was actually quite helpful when I was questioning. So I hope you guys found this to be at least helpful in that way, you know? All right. So thank you guys for listening. And hopefully you guys will like. I think the next episode is episode 7, which was the last episode. All right, so hopefully you guys will listen to the next episode, and thank you for listening, and goodbye.